Did you know the sky over New England went completely dark in the middle of the day? Not from an eclipse, but from wildfire smoke drifting down from Canada combined with dense fog. Courts stopped. Animals went to sleep. People genuinely believed it was the end of the world. That was May 1780, and it is one of 20 facts about New England that most people have never come across. I'm Steve. This is Wild States Facts. Let's get into it. Fact 1. In the spring of 1780, a phenomenon now called New England's Dark Day turned the sky black across the entire region in broad daylight. A combination of smoke from massive Canadian wildfires and thick fog filtered sunlight so completely that candles were lit at noon. The Connecticut State Legislature debated adjourning because members believed Judgment Day had arrived. One delegate argued they should stay. If the world was ending, they might as well be doing their duty. The cause was not identified for over a century. Fact 2. 4 Massachusetts towns no longer exist because of a decision made in the 1930s. Dana, Enfield, Greenwich, and Prescott were disincorporated, their cemeteries relocated, and their residents forced out so the Swift River Valley could be flooded to supply Boston with drinking water. The Quabbin Reservoir that covers them is now the largest inland body of water in Massachusetts. Stone walls still run along the reservoir floor. Cellar holes sit exactly where houses stood. The roads that connected those 4 towns are still down there in the cold and the dark. Fact 3. A beluga whale skeleton was found in a farmer's field in Charlotte, Vermont, roughly 80 miles from the nearest ocean. The explanation is geological. After the last ice age, a temporary arm of the Atlantic Ocean called the Champlain Sea flooded the region. Beluga whales swam through what is now landlocked Vermont. When the land rebounded and the sea withdrew, one whale was left behind in a field. The Vermont state fossil is a beluga whale. Fact 4. The desert of Maine near Freeport is a genuine desert. Several acres of exposed glacial sand and silt sitting in the middle of one of the most forested states in the country. The sand was deposited by glaciers and covered by topsoil for thousands of years. Overfarming. In the 19th century, stripped the protective layer, and the sand began to spread, eventually swallowing farm buildings whole. Today, it is still expanding. A desert in Maine, created not by climate but by a century-old farming mistake. Fact 5. Connecticut's Hartford Basin began forming roughly 200 million years ago when the supercontinent Pangaea started breaking apart. As the crust split, a rift valley opened, filled with sediment, and preserved a detailed record of the early Jurassic world, including over 500 fossilized dinosaur footprints discovered accidentally in 1966 when a bulldozer operator in Rocky Hill cut into a layer of red sandstone. The prints belong to theropod dinosaurs that walked through subtropical mud where a highway interchange now runs. The site is Dinosaur State Park. The tracks are still there. Fact 6. In September 1938, a Category 3 hurricane struck New England with almost no warning because weather forecasting technology could not track storms moving at the speed this one traveled. The storm surge reached over 25 feet in some coastal locations. It killed approximately 700 people, carved new inlets through solid barrier beaches, permanently altered the shape of the coastline, and destroyed forests across the region. The physical geography of New England's shore changed in a single afternoon. The changes are still visible in the coastline today. Fact 7. Lake Champlain in Vermont contains the Chazy Reef, one of the oldest known diverse fossil reef systems on Earth, approximately 480 million years old. Built by marine organisms when this region sat beneath a tropical sea near the equator, the reef is now preserved in the limestone bedrock below the lake. It represents some of the earliest complex reef-building life on the planet, sitting quietly at the bottom of a lake most people associate with monster sightings. Fact 8. Vermont's Smuggler's Notch is a mountain pass so narrow that the road through it cannot be plowed in winter, so it is closed for months every year. Between the enormous boulders that fill the notch are natural caves and hidden passages large enough to conceal people and goods. In the early 19th century, when trade with Canada was legally restricted, those passages were used actively for smuggling. The name stuck. The road is still closed every winter for the same reason. The geography that made it useful for smuggling also makes it impossible to maintain. Fact 9. Maine's coastline appears modest on a flat map. Measured along every inlet, cove, tidal river, and island shore, it exceeds 3,500 miles, longer than California's entire Pacific coast. Maine has over 3,000 offshore islands, most uninhabited. Cadillac Mountain on Mount Desert Island, rising 1,528 feet directly from the Atlantic, is the first place in the contiguous United States to receive sunlight each morning during autumn and winter. The highest point on the eastern seaboard is also the first place in the country to see the sunrise. Fact 10. Mount Washington in New Hampshire sits at the intersection of three major storm tracks. In April 1934, an observatory on the summit recorded a wind gust of 231 miles per hour, the highest surface wind speed ever measured by human instruments at that time, a record that stood for over 60 years. The mountain has claimed over 160 lives. Snow has been recorded there in every month of the year. The Summit Observatory has been continuously staffed since 1932. Rime ice builds up on every surface in winter as supercooled fog freezes on contact. The observatory team calls it the world's worst weather. That is not hyperbole. Fact 11. The Connecticut River, over 400 miles long, is the longest river in New England. In 1840, a flood cut directly through the neck of a large river meandered near Northampton, Massachusetts, isolating a loop of the old channel that still exists today as a separate body of water called the Oxbow. Thomas Cole painted the meander in 1836, just 4 years before the flood changed it permanently. The painting became one of the most famous American landscape works in history. The geography it captured was gone within a generation. Before we keep going, drop a comment telling us which of these facts caught you off guard. We read everything that comes in, and those responses genuinely shape what gets made next. Fact 12. Rhode Island's Narragansett Bay was carved by glaciers and flooded as sea levels rose, creating a complex system of more than 40 islands. Block Island, 12 miles offshore, has Mohegan Bluffs along its southern coast, nearly 200-foot-tall clay and sand cliffs, exposing the raw glacial deposits from which the island itself was built. The same ice sheet that left Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket also left Block Island, terminal moraines marking the southernmost extent of the Laurentide ice sheet. Fact 13. Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire has been tracking spring ice out dates continuously since 1887. Over 130 years of unbroken records documenting the date each year when the ice melts enough for a boat to cross the lake. The record has shifted measurably earlier over the past century, providing one of the longest-running visible records of climate change in the United States. A tradition that started as a local curiosity became an inadvertent 130-year climate data set. Fact 14. The White Mountain Notches, Crawford Notch and Franconia Notch, were not carved by slow glacial creep. They were cut by catastrophic outburst floods of subglacial meltwater released as the Laurentide ice sheet retreated. The volumes of water involved were enormous, the velocities were extreme, and the cutting happened in geological instants rather than millennia. The dramatic steep-walled valleys visible today are the work of a handful of violent flood events, not millions of years of patient erosion. Fact 15. Cobscook Bay in northeastern Maine experiences tidal ranges of up to 28 feet, among the highest in the eastern United States. The extreme tidal differential creates conditions where rivers feeding into the bay can appear to flow backwards twice daily as the incoming tide pushes salt water upstream against the current. A freshwater river flowing the wrong direction, not because of an earthquake, but because the ocean makes it do so every 12 hours. Fact 16. The Holyoke Range in Massachusetts runs east to west. the opposite orientation of almost every other mountain range in New England. Most of the region's mountain chains run north to south, following the grain of the ancient Appalachian collision. The Holyoke Range was formed by volcanic activity associated with the same Pangea breakup that produced Connecticut's Hartford Basin, and its unusual east-to-west orientation is a direct product of the direction the rift opened. A mountain range pointing the wrong way for reasons buried 200 million years in the past. Fact 17. Cape Cod's distinctive shape, the bent arm curling into the Atlantic, was deposited by the retreating ice sheet roughly 18,000 years ago. It is not built on bedrock, it is a pile of glacial debris. Ocean currents have been redistributing that material ever since, continuously moving sand northward along the outer shore and reshaping the hook at the tip. The kettle ponds scattered across Cape Cod, hundreds of round freshwater lakes, formed when buried ice blocks left by the glacier melted and the ground above them collapsed. Every round pond on Cape Cod marks where a chunk of glacier was buried and eventually dissolved. Fact 18. The Gulf of Maine is warming faster than approximately 99% of the world's ocean surface, a rate driven by the specific oceanographic conditions of the Gulf Stream and the way it interacts with the shallow underwater topography of the Gulf floor. The warming is measurably changing the species composition of the Gulf, shifting where lobsters, fish, and other marine life can survive. New England's most iconic seafood industry is operating in an ocean that is changing faster than almost any other body of water on Earth. Fact 19. Vermont's Long Trail, completed in 1930, is the oldest long-distance hiking trail in the United States, predating even the Appalachian Trail, which it inspired. The trail runs 272 miles along the full length of the Green Mountains from Massachusetts to the Canadian border, entirely within Vermont. The Appalachian Trail follows the Long Trail for about 100 miles before branching east. The most famous long-distance trail in America exists because Vermont's trail was already there first. Fact 20, and the one that ties this whole region together. New England is the most geologically processed landscape in the eastern United States, compressed, scraped, flooded, re-exposed, and rearranged by forces operating over hundreds of millions of years. The same ice sheet that buried it under a mile of ice also built Cape Cod, carved Lake Champlain, left a whale in a Vermont field, and created the desert in Maine's forest. The storms that continue to hit it keep rearranging the coastline. The mountains keep losing their glaciers. And 4 towns are still sitting on the bottom of a reservoir in the dark, exactly where they were when the water rose. New England is not settled. It is still becoming what it will eventually be. That is 20 facts that prove this region runs a lot deeper than its reputation. If one of them changed how you see New England, we want to know which one. Leave it in the comments. We are genuinely in there reading. And if this is the kind of geography content you want every week, subscribe to Wild States Facts. We cover every state, one wild fact at a time. See you next week.